Stanford University.
Early on, we mentioned Fred Terman, but I think we may have gone too quickly over that. I know you have some thoughts about Fred and your work with him and what he meant to the university. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, I didn't really know him well, but it's always been a puzzle to me of how he came about and found all the wonderful people he did throughout the university.
Right.
And I always still laugh about how simple it was when Rolf Eliason just asked me to come to Stanford, and I came to Stanford, and I got here and found all these other people, and Stanford just really became certainly one of the few best universities in the world. From all the people he brought in at that time were wonderful people. It's so that's one thing. I don't know how to explain that, but I met him just a few times and talked with him. But the time that was important to me was the National Academy of Engineering had just started not too many years. I don't know if it was before I came here or just shortly after, but and Fred Terman was one of the founders of the National Academy of Engineering. And but during the time he wanted to get Rolf Eliason nominated, mm-hmm. and so he asked me to fill out the application form for Rolf for him. So I did that. I got the information. It's just more traditional things that you can pick up. And I went over to Fred Terman. Now, he's no longer provost at this time. He had a small office, really small little office, And he was sitting in it, so I brought it in and talked about a little bit. Then he turned to me and said, well, how are you doing? Or something like that. And I don't remember what I said, but I must have said, well, I'm doing okay. And I must have looked harassed or something. He said, well, listen, he said, you just got to get yourself organized. Now, I heard him say that many times later that he said, I'm not smart, I'm just organized.
Yes.
He's always I heard him say that many times after. Yeah. And he said, you just got to organize. And he said, I'll tell you what. He said, I get up about 6 o'clock in the morning and I write a page in my book. About 10 o'clock at the university, about 10 o'clock, I'll go over to the university then. He said, I see people, appointments. He said, the telephone rings. I don't take any telephone calls. Person who's made an appointment to see me is in my office is the most important person. Telephone calls, they can wait, but this person's made all this effort, so I'm going to talk with them first. So I do that. In the afternoon, he said then, the telephone calls that come in, I'll spend an hour or so on the telephone calls. And then I have a whole afternoon to do other things I want to do. He said, but it's important that you budget your time. Other people are going to put a lot of demands on you, and you've got to decide what's important to you and budget your time to do those things to make sure you get the important things done. That has been such an important device. It's very simple, but it's a very important device. And I was invited by Claire Sawyer after he did his first book. He invited me to be co-author on his second book. Now we've finished the 5th edition. I mean, he's died. I have another co-author. But, and then I've written another one with another colleague of mine. I had a former student that wanted to write a book with me one time. And I said, okay. And I started working on a couple of chapters on it, which I wrote. And he never did it. Never wrote a chapter in it. And it dawned on me, that what Fred Terman said was important. If a book, the last book we did, it took 5 years to do it. And if that's going to be, and that's a lot of time. And if you don't decide that's going to be your number one priority, and every week say I'm either going to put a full day. I mean, Fred Terman said I get up and do a page a day.
Yes.
I don't work that, but I say I can take a day, 1 day a week, and that's going to be my day. And that's what we're going to work on, the book. And then I can do the other things. But if that's important enough to me, if I think it's important enough, you got to make the time for it and stick to it. And other things just have to fit in.
And you've been able to maintain that discipline throughout your career to do it that way?
Yeah. And that's not only in the book, but in other. So although some professors they like to have open door, and it's nice for students to have an open door so students can walk in anytime, you won't get those. If that's your first priority, that's fine.
That's right.
But if you want to do all the other things and be on committees and write books and write papers and write purge proposals, you can't do that.
I assume you've provided that advice to your students. Did you provide that advice to your children? Have they followed it?
No, I haven't.
That's always the biggest challenge of all.
That's a good one. I have provided to students. The students I work with on the book, on this revision of the book with Claire Sawyer. I had one student who I didn't think could do that, but I invited him to be the third author because Claire Sawyer was old and dying. And so he accepted. I know it was 1989 because he accepted that at the San Francisco earthquake.
Yes.
But so he came up and he had already agreed, and then he said, I want to do it. He said, but one problem, I just got my arm twisted to be chairman of the department at the University of Iowa. I said, it's never happened. I said, well, you're not going to be able to do it unless you decide this is a really high priority for you.
That's right.
If you decide it's a high priority, you've got to tell your administration that you're going to want 1 day a week. Put aside, forget about everything else, 1 day a week where you can do this alone and no one will bother you. And he did it. And they even got an office outside all by himself, no phones or anything. He went there and it worked. And I've seen that, but what it is just deciding there's some things that are very important to you. Then you just got to put the time there and don't let other things, committees or whatever, come in and organize. And so I always felt very good to Fred Terman. And I've told that to many of my PhD students when we get something done. That organization is so important.
A terrific story because time is the most precious resource. When you think about everything you do, nothing is more important than that. And how you spend it will allow you to be terribly productive or not very productive. So that's great advice.
I always have office hours, got plenty of office hours for students. So I won't ignore the students. I think they're very important. I want to talk with them for classes and so forth. A lot of time. But it's not, I don't have an open door policy. I have a sign-up sheet, with lots of office hours open. I had a sign-up sheet so people could come up and put their name on. And I'll be there. I'll talk with them. And I won't answer the telephone while it's happening.
That's very good. And I like that advice as well. This is future generations will look at this videotape or read the transcript. That's great advice. Maybe your lasting legacy about how to people spend time. That's terrific. I want to come back to the Western Region Hazardous Substance Research Center, which opened in '89, and you were the director from '89 to 2002. What was the purpose of that center, and what was your experience in leading it?
Well, the purpose of it, of our center, I mean, every center put in a different. They're all dealt with hazardous chemicals in the environment, which the number of chemicals has just gone up hugely, and they're in groundwaters and air and so forth. Well, what they want to do is this is for hazardous chemicals in water. What are they? What happens to them? And it was not so much the health effects because National Institute of Health was looking at health effects. But we were looking at what are these chemicals that are there and what is their fate, what processes affect them, how they move through the environment. So we could look at how to control them. So we had started on this groundwater, and through Superfund, that was this major groundwater contamination was found throughout the country. Department of Energy sites where we had built nuclear bombs. That's a huge, huge problem there. But all industries, every industry is using hazardous chemicals one way or another, and let them get into the groundwater, forgot about it, and now we find a contamination throughout the country. So our focus was primarily on movement and fate of chemicals in groundwater. And so we set up and how to remove them, biological process. So we set up pilot studies at Moffett Field. We had a station there, which we used for a number of years. The ones I mentioned, that was actually the one in Borden with the group there. That was even done before that, so we had the information on that. So I think we were probably the leading group in the country studying movement and fate of chemicals.
And then that center was eventually closed, phased out?
Yeah, well, it was just started at as 5 or 6 years, something like that. But it just continued on. And when I think you mentioned 2002, it was after I retired. I went for a few years, and then they wanted to do a reevaluation, a renewal of it, rebidding for the. And so by that time, I didn't want to do it anymore. So my colleague, Lou Semprini,
yes,
who worked with us here and then got a position at Oregon State, he took it on as director for a couple of years, and then EPA folded. EPA didn't want it because the research centers at EPA felt that the Congress had taken their money and given it to the universities. There was a bit of a, and we were doing, through these 5 centers, as far as EPA, and EPA was funded through EPA, but it was congressional mandate
that they must
to give the money, but EPA has got to give it to us. So they looked at it as pork barrel, but it was, it wasn't given to some university, become some senator like that university.
Right.
It was on a competitive basis in 5 regions. And we didn't look at it as pork because we looked at it as serving important.
But they felt that monies that were going to you would have otherwise been kept with them.
Would have been theirs, yeah. I think initially that Congress put in money, but you know how these things get eroded over time.
Right. So the direction that Senate got you to the point where you moving forward, and then you decided to move to be retired, right? Mm-hmm. You were moving to retirement in 1999. What caused you to decide that you wanted to stop formally being a frontline full-time faculty member?
Well, a couple things. The center helped, was part of that. And the other thing, Stanford gave us, and it had an incentive program.
Oh, I remember that incentive program, yes.
And I had sort of thought myself, when do I want to retire? And I thought by the time I got to 70, it's probably a good time to retire. Now, I've been teaching then, 35, 40 years, and I really like teaching. I enjoyed it all the time. I think I was a good teacher. But it was so scheduled, and by this time it was, maybe say getting old, it wasn't.
Yes.
And I didn't want to be so scheduled, that's part of it. And I felt if I stayed on, I would have to do that. The other thing was, it was nice to bring in new blood, someone,
So your billet became free, somebody else would come in.
Then the billet became free and someone else could come in.
Right.
And that halftime, the university game, I could go essentially, they would give you half funding.
That's right.
If half year, I think it was 2 years, almost 2 years of half funding, something like that. I said, okay, I have the center, and the center required that I be half-time in it. So there was money in the center for me to pay me for half-time.
Oh, good.
So I thought, well, essentially I've got a full-time, I have a full-time salary into about 72. And then I even had some contracts from some companies, DuPont and some others, to continue doing some research. So I was kind of half-time on the research side for several years after. And that was a nice thing. Stanford allowed that. I could retire. We could bring in a new person, and we could overlap somewhat. And I could continue just focusing on the research, which I really like to do. Wanted to do that, if I'm still doing, but that gave me some time into the 70s.
So you became emeritus, And then were you officially recalled to active duty, or are you?
Yeah, they do. What they do is which is great. They just call you back if you got money. They'll call you back to duty as long as you bring in the research money. Stanford not pushing you out. You're doing some research, working with students, and working with other faculty. It's fine, and that's another. I thought that was a great program, and it just allowed me to I was fortunate that I had the research money that allowed me to do it.
And you had lots of opportunity to work with and become familiar with John Hennessy, who was dean and then provost and then president. You want to comment on your time with John and your thoughts about him?
Yes, I very much. When I decided to go into retirement, Jim Leckie had been in the program. He came into in the 70s. Paul Roberts was similar age to Jim. And here we were the three engineering people in our program.
Yes.
And we brought in, and now by this time we had Alfred Sporman and Lynn Hildeman. Lynn was working on air pollution. And Alfred Sporman's work, he's a microbiologist. But the three engineers, we were an engineering program, and three of the engineers were about to retire.
That's right.
So I worried about that, what's going to happen. And we were senior people who bring in someone's really junior, then it's years before you sort of catch up again so that people know you exist. So I talked to Jeff. Jeff Kossoff was chairman at the time, and he said, well, let's go talk with John Hennessy, who was dean. John Hennessy, he's a computer scientist. He went out, started his own company. He's an entrepreneur. And in our field, it's all public service.
That's right.
So you can't go to the industry's not interested. So we went up and I said, okay, let's go talk with him. So I told him, I said, we've been number one in the country from U.S., at least Youth News and Report, ever since they started doing this. We've had the best program in the country. 3 senior people are going to leave soon, and the program is just going to collapse.
You're right.
Unless we can get, senior faculty. And so he said, I don't know if it was that day, or if he talked, I forget now, but he gave us 2 senior positions, which is unprecedented in the School of Engineering.
2 billets came.
Yeah, 2 billets. Well, one was replacing me, and one would replace Paul.
Yes.
Well, Paul ended up deciding to retire quite early, about the same time I did, and he was still in his, I don't know if he's 62 at the time or maybe even earlier. So we were opening up our 2 billets. So Craig Criddle came in.
Yes.
At mine, and Dick Luthi came in.
All right.
Both. And those are senior billets. They weren't starting assistant professor.
Right.
So that was a real savior to the program. The other thing I said is our laboratories, which now in Sherman, we moved in 76. By this time, they're getting beat up. We've expanded the faculty, got a lot more going on, and we really need some help in helping with the laboratory. So he said, and then he said, okay, I'll go out and see if I can get some industrial support for that. I told him, I said, industry's not interested in the environment. So he said, I'll see. So he, a few weeks later, I don't know how long later, he said, you're right, industry, I can't get the money from industry, so I'll go after some foundations. Again, he went after the Packard Foundation, gave him the money for our revamping of our basement. And then he went to the Ford Research Foundation, not Ford, but Ford Research Foundation, and they gave him money too. So he got money from foundations for us to revamp our laboratories in Sherman. Now, it turned out Sherman had to be torn down, and this thing came.
Right.
But so he, so I owe so much to him. And I actually, after he did that, I sent a little email to him thanking him and saying that I was surprised that as an entrepreneur and, like he was,
right,
that in computer science, because we usually in civil engineering, actually a lot of universities, the deans look really down on civil engineering and so forth, give them hard times and cut them down. And here he was really supporting us. I'm really surprised to see, developing support of the environment. And he sort of like he said, well, we entrepreneurs know that the environment is very important to our future. So he was like all entrepreneurs. I don't think he's really all entrepreneurs, but he was. He's very supportive. So then he went up, of course, to become provost. Jeff had a lot of good contact with him through their contact in School of Engineering. Jeff has been very supportive of our environment and has always kindly said to me that the bringing together and what we did and working with others, cooperative work throughout the university was so very important. And that's something he wanted to continue here at Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
So his contact and talking with Hennessy, when Hennessy went to be provost, there was an initiative that had started several years before. Actually, when Condi Rice was provost, she appointed Don Kennedy and me and Wally Falcon to try to think about we doing something about the environment. So we used to get together and talk about things. And then there was a panel that was started that brought together. Roz Naylor came in and headed that up. They called a panel, and every week they would invite some speaker from around the world to come in, and a group of professors from the Air Lakes, people from other departments would come in and listen to it. And that was developed as kind of an outspring of this, trying to get more interest in the environment. Well, it's a pretty small activity. And it was interesting. Roz Naylor said at the time she got the professors like myself, she had a sign. I don't know if she said, no, I think she said one time that we had to sign a statement that said we would come to these. I don't even recall that, but I came. But they were really enjoyable. But that was growing. And we had a little bit of report, and once in a while people got together. And Jeff then sort of picked that up, and Buzz Thompson got involved.
From the law school.
And Hennessy, talked with Hennessy about it. So Hennessy became, and when he became president, he put the environment as one of his top priorities.
Yes, he did.
And with that, then the Woods, got together with the Woods, and the Woods funded the Institute, and Buzz and Jeff became members of that. And then down the way, and Jeff was always hoping for another building. By this time, we'd had, the Clark Center was one where you brought people from engineering and medicine together.
That's correct.
Alfred Sporman went over there, but
right.
That was the concept of the Yang and Yamazaki building, Y2E2, bring them together, and so it was really neat in terms of tearing down all civil engineering went out. So it really brought us all into one building. I think it's a wonderful facility. Now, the things you learn about that kind of thing is, it's always got their advantages and disadvantages. The advantage is we get to be talking with people throughout the university. It's full of people in there who are interested in environment and energy. And that's wonderful. You get seminars. There's so many seminars. In fact, so many seminars you can't go to them all. The disadvantage is it spreads out your own group. One thing in Terman, we were kind of on the first floor, but it was kind of an open, and all our students were down there, and actually a couple of faculty were on the bottom floor. And so as a group, you were always bumping into each other, seeing each other. Now we're kind of scattered throughout the building, and our students are in the basement. But I'm up on, of course I'm retired now, but some of the faculty are up on, say, the second floor, scattered from, and the close contact with you had with them is broken up a bit. Now, I don't know if that affects their education or not, but we were probably a lot closer in with the students then. So that's a disadvantage, but it has the advantage of so much more interaction with them. So how many people can you interact with,
So what was your relationship in the development of the Woods Institute as that went forward?
I didn't have any. By this time, I'm retired. I didn't have any relationship. Just Jeff and Lenore called me in one day, and let me, this covers up this other side. I said the Packards are so important to me.
Yes.
Remember once Lucille Packard gave us the $5,000? Yes. They gave us Terman Engineering Center.
Right.
Then Hennessy got money to improve the laboratories from Packard Foundation.
Right.
And now Lenore and Susan Packard,
yes. Right, his wife.
They came in and endowed the director.
Correct. And who's that directorship named after?
Perry McCarty.
This is the Perry McCarty directorship that both Buzz and Jeff hold as co-directors now. So how do you feel about that?
Oh, that's very nice. I really appreciate it. I feel very honored.
It's really quite an honor. I know. In speaking with Jeff about this interview, he wanted to make sure that I asked that question about you and to you about the special relationship you have to the building and to the institute in particular, and how much you mean to them. And I think that being honored by naming the directorship after you is really quite special.
Well, I feel so.
Were you surprised?
Oh, of course I was. It's funny coming back. Jeff said, Lenore wants to talk to you. I said, oh my gosh, they're going to ask me to go out and raise money. I'm not good at raising. I couldn't sell cars. How could I sell them? So I went up there and I think of that. And they said, I want to see if we can name this center after you. So I was very honored.
Well, I know that, and as I said, that Jeff and Buzz are two special people themselves, and they feel quite honored to have your name attached to their titles. So
it is such a wonderful institute. All of what they've done and so much. And again, through Hennessy's support, they got the money to give these seed grants to people.
Yes, that's right.
So if you work with a person across some other department, different disciplines and so forth, and put a proposal together, it's all designed for this interdisciplinary collaboration.
And that started
very effective.
Right. With the Clark Center BioX was, I think, the very first way of doing that. And very powerful.
Oh, it is so. It just brings so many people start ideas that you could never, think, I can't go to NSF on this kind of thing. You have to do a little bit of research initially to make sure you got to have something that you can sell. Say, look, this is going to work. And that allows you to do it. So that and the seminar, the speakers, the panels, just so many things that Jeff and Buzz are really top people in making that thing to go. So it's just integration. And of course, then you have the energy centers, which I'm not involved with myself, but they're functioning together in the building. So I think it's really powerful what they're doing.
It's really quite extraordinary to see the growth and the fact that you can look back at that and know that embedded in that is your DNA, right? A lot of the work that you did led up to the development of the Woods Institute and the Y2 building. We've been focusing in on Stanford and your work within the university. I know you've done a lot of international work. You've worked with Tsinghua University. You've worked with Danyang Technological University. You've done some work in Korea with Inha University. You want to talk a little bit about your international experiences and how you then can relate that back to what you do at Stanford, or did at Stanford?
Yeah, I'm glad to. It's really interesting how our interactions with Asia have come out now. The Asian universities, of course, the countries are all growing rapidly. They look at the United States as having the greatest university system in the world, which it has. And so many of their students, you talk with all the professors over there, almost invariably they've come to
that's right.
U.S. and gotten a PhD. And they want to emanate, they want to build up their program. So first one was in Tsinghua University, which is certainly, they compare themselves as the MIT of China. Right. And they wanted to build up a world-class university. So they invited us, now it means us, four of us, Dick Luthi, Jim Leckie, Craig Criddle, and myself, to go over there and develop a course and we engage in research discussions with them, which we did. And but they have, like we have 6 faculty. They have 75 faculty in environmental engineering, a separate program.
Wow.
But it's a different kind of thing. I went to Harbin University. I have a honorary professorship there. It's got 75 or 100 people, and they're such a different thing. I don't have time to discuss how they're organized and so forth, but I don't see, unless they change to universities like the United States, how they can get ahead. The thing about universities is when you become an assistant professor, you're the boss. You make your decisions on what you're going to do, your research, you write proposals, and you've got to prove yourself. Assistant professor, you prove yourself. You've got to prove yourself in 6 years that you can, you're a really capable instructor and you can get research and you're first-class research. Tsinghua University, associate professors, they have something like 35 associate professors, and the country allows them to promote 2 to a full professor a year. So if you're one of 35 and 2 are promoted a year to full professor, how long are you going to be? And the associate professor cannot have a PhD student. Now, would you go there if you're really a top and you got an offer from Stanford, you got an offer from MIT or Harvard or something?
So when when you share the experiences of what happened, your experience, the way you've progressed in your career, and what happens at Stanford, what is the reaction that you get? What are people they're saying? We should be more like you, or it's impossible to change, or what things?
Well, I was invited as chair of a review committee at Tsinghua University several years later for environmental engineering, and it was the first review that they were doing of their departments, and they were going to go through the whole university doing. They have something like 50 departments. They're going to do 10 a year, and one of the first was. With the environmental engineering is one of the first. And I chaired a panel that had a professor from Caltech, MIT, Harvard, English, I'm trying to think of, in England.
Oxford, yeah.
No, Imperial College of London.
Right. Yes.
And so it was top people. So we got over there and learned this. I learned about how it works. And I just wrote a report indicating that if there's no way they can attract good people, talk to their provost and so forth about that. So it's a really good program, good people over there. I mean, huge, but I don't see the quality of the education is dependent upon the quality of the people you bring in. And when you bring them in, if they're really good, if some young assistant professor, turn them loose. And that's what we do here. Prove it yourself. Go out and get it. And it works. It really worked well there. And the way they have it structured, and you can't have any, it's like if you get to the top, you've got everything. If you're at the bottom, you have nothing. How can you work your way up? So we made that comment. We made that to them. And they're changing. They're trying to change that direction. I think they're under some constraints. But if all the reviews came in similar, because they went and got good people, it was an honest review, and they got honest thoughts from our group. If down the way they can change, I think they can do it. But they've really got to change that kind of I think. I can't see how they can really get the kind of quality people. And so much is based upon publication and numbers and so forth. Now, you asked about the other thing that's really important was Inha University.
Yes.
In Korea, they had the same thing. They developed a program called World Class University Program. And this program was different, and it had 3 steps. One is to bring in starting assistant professor, sort of intermediate person, and then bring in some senior people. And what they did is they funded, it was a 5-year program. You had to write a proposal. They had to have someone in the university there, invite some colleague from some other university, and senior person to work with them for a 5-year period, in which we had to go over for 2 months. I have a former student of mine, Jae-Ho Bae at Inha University, and he asked me if I would work with him on a proposal. And I was, now, I'm through with hazardous waste for 30 years. We got new organisms, and did a lot of work on that. And I wanted to go back to anaerobic wastewater treatment. It was my favorite. Now, we found the anaerobic degradation of these compounds, so it wasn't that I got out of it, but I want to go back to anaerobic treatment because I think, like in California, water is scarce. We've got to get all the resources out of it, and one of the resources is methane. And everyone said we can't treat dilute domestic wastewater that way and produce methane. And I had always wondered whether we could that. Now, our EPA in the United States was against methane fermentation back in the 70s when EPA was formed, because they said we're a space age culture now, and anaerobic treatment is an old technology, and we want space age. So they got Palo Alto put in an incinerator. That was their idea, space age. And now Palo Alto is trying to get rid of their incinerator and go to anaerobic treatment because it costs so much energy to dry the sludge so they could burn it that it was just an energy hog. But in the 70s, we didn't worry about energy. Today, we do. So now we're at a time when energy is important. So we said, well, let's see if we can't, how well we can do. And so my colleagues, Jay Obey and so forth, so we started studying and find if we start with very dilute wastewater, we can actually, and using membranes, which are new now, we can build a treatment system that is smaller than an traditional aerobic treatment system, much smaller, have it run on its own energy. And another problem is when you run aerobically, the bacteria get a lot of energy, so you get lots of bacteria, so you're producing tons and tons. Half the organic material goes into bacteria. It's like if I fed you food and half of it went into increasing your weight, you get a lot of you. Right. Well, we get a lot of bacteria, and so that's what Palo Alto has to incinerate, and it costs a lot of money. So this process, the bacteria, they give us the methane, and there's very little energy for them, so you don't get many bacteria growing. So you can run the process. Not only does it run on its own energy, you don't have all these solids that you got to do something with, like incinerate them. So we tried, and surprising, it really worked well. And so we built a pilot plant in Korea, which has now been operating for well over a year. Singapore, I've been working in Singapore and committees and so forth, working them, but I encourage that NTU, Nanyang Technological University, some colleagues over there, and they put in a proposal. They're getting from Public Utility Board, so they're building another pilot plant there, just similar to Korea. Korea got really cold temperatures. People said you couldn't do it down to 10 degrees. Well, we're doing it down to 10 degrees. Korea's got warm temperatures, so it won't be a problem. So we can see how it goes. Stanford is building one.
Yeah, our campus community is doing it.
Campus is going to build a pilot plant here. And one of the things that Craig Kittle did, working with the Stanford utility people, been working with them 5 years independent. Dick Luthi independently brought in a new NSF engineering center, the only NSF engineering center we've ever had at Stanford. Yes. Dealing with looking at water and municipal water, looking at a new way where we could get resources from it rather than put resources in, get resources out, namely water, energy, and the nutrients, agricultural nutrients. Craig Criddle has talked with the utilities people here. The university has given us $2 million to start a platform where we can test new ideas. And one of the main features in it is going to be one of these anaerobic that we developed in Korea. You
should feel pretty good about that.
Yeah.
That's really special.
So that's what I'm doing now, the traveling now, because there's interest all over the world in this.
Is what is happening on this campus with that process unique to universities? Is this the first time it's going to happen? At Stanford?
Well, it's the first time in U.S.
The first time in U.S.?
Yeah. First time, the one in Korea we built there, and then the one in Singapore will be Singapore. Taiwan, we're working with a bunch of colleagues in Taiwan, and they're working up. They're doing the pilots. They're small laboratory scale studies at treatment plants, and they're aiming for a pilot.
So there'll be a huge spotlight right here.
So we're going to be, and it's It's the first one of this kind. The General Electric has been doing aerobic membrane bioreactors for a number of years, and they've really got a research group that's working on anaerobic, but they clean their membranes in a different way, and which is up to the point has been very high energy, and our way is a new way, which the thing we just, again, serendipity found that what we have is little particles of granular activated carbon, that's a sorber, but we find bacteria grow on it very well. And it's what's called fluidized bed reactor. You recirculate water and keep these little grains sort of suspended in the water. They're trying to settle, and the water's pushing them up, so they're suspended, and bacteria grow on them. And that's a nice reactor. A former student from MIT many years ago invented this system, did the first ones, and one from Cornell. But so I always liked the reactor. But what we did, and I thought it would probably work for this wastewater. So what we did was we put membranes in just to keep any suspended material from going out. And the problem with membranes is they foul. General Electric and others use what they call gas sparging, put in a lot of blow in air or blow in recycled methane and jiggle them around and try to keep them clean.
Yes.
Ours, the granular activated carbon, we put in and just sort of rubs on the surface, cleans them.
Oh, interesting.
Low energy.
Very interesting.
And it gives us some other advantage, and then so we can get very, very short detention times with it. And so, it's a breakthrough. So it's fun. I really enjoy doing it, and we'll see how far it goes.
We're coming.
This is the first one ever built, so we got a lot of ways to improve it.
Well, it's certainly it's going to give lots of graduate students an opportunity to research.
Yeah,
that's really good stuff. We're coming soon to a close of this interview, but a few more questions, and I want to sort of look at it now in a bit more of a personal way, and that is, how did you thinking about? I believe your family grew up on the Stanford campus. Is that right? Did you live on the campus?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So you have how many children?
4.
So what was the impact of having your children be raised in the Stanford campus in their life, do you think?
Oh, they all loved it. They really liked living here. I mean, of course, we grew up in Detroit. They were all born. My son was born in Detroit, and my 3 daughters were all born in Massachusetts. But of course, we came out here when they were all young, because snow and everything like there. But to come here, and it's just. And the Stanford, there's so much to do around here, and it's just such a different environment. So they always talk about it. They always come home every summer. I have one daughter in New York, one daughter in Alabama, and my son in Woodard City, and I have a daughter in Palo Alto. So we have 2 of them close, and the daughter in Palo Alto has 2 children. Both of them are in college now. My son had 2 children. They're both out of college. One went to Stanford, one went to Berkeley. Then I have my daughter in Alabama. She's working on the space station.
As an engineer?
Is more computer tech science. She maintains a computer system that connects with the space station.
So did any become environmental engineers?
No. My son's a computer scientist, and his son's a computer scientist, and one of these other sons, a science teacher, high school science teacher. That's what he likes to do. No, I don't have any environmental engineers.
So, you are, you've had a very distinguished career at Stanford. You've been certainly appointed to the National Academy of Engineering and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and many other awards and recognitions. And how have those had an impact on your life and your work at Stanford? What has that been like for you?
Well, it's always very satisfying to get nice awards and get the recognition for the work. How can you not enjoy that? The other thing that's interesting at Stanford, which is you get these rewards, but so is everybody else at Stanford, and it's and that's kind of nice, because I know other colleagues at some universities don't have it. they get an award in the university. It's a big thing at the university, and maybe it's more. Here, it's pretty humble, you know.
I think that's right.
And it's not. It's a nice recognition, but it's not something that really distorts anything else that you do that I can see. I mean, you get very busy, you get a lot more invitations, maybe, and so forth. But I like that. I mean, I think that's it's a nice thing about here. You know, you're around a lot of very special people.
I think
it's a wonderful place.
I think you're right. That's one of the reasons I've been so attracted to work here and be here. It's a very special place. There aren't many places like this in the world, and we've been spoiled in working in a place like this. Well, we really have. So now, are there any? I have two questions left. Are there any things that you've not had a chance to talk about your history here, your experiences here, that I've not covered in the questions I've asked you?
Oh, one could go on forever. I guess but I don't have any. I think we've covered most of the things we've said, and for me, being here has just been a real privilege. As you go through, as I talk about these things, there's so many things that just happened at the right time, being at the right place at the right time. Things opened up for you,
right? And
I that's where I think I'm very fortunate to have been in those places at the time. I always talk about the old day when I got drafted in the Army. I said, well, if that happened to happen, the opportunity to teach at MIT might have not happened, then the opportunity to come like that. So it was a pretty hard time for us with all the children we had, no money. So starting out until for a number of years, it was the family suffered pretty much financially, but you look back and you think, well, it was well worth it, and it opened up these opportunities, which who knows what would have been done if it didn't all work out that way. But I'm really glad to be here. It's been just a wonderful life.
Last question for you. So in reflection now, and thinking back the number of years you've worked here, and knowing that at some point in the future people will be looking at this videotape, what are you most proud of, or things you're most proud of, and the legacy you'd like to leave behind? When people think about you as a faculty member, as a researcher, a teacher, a citizen of the community, what do you want people to think about you?
Well, I'm just one cog in the wheel, but I like to think that, having started out and then coming here with the concept, the way we broadened out the environmental engineering concept to be much more inclusive, interdisciplinary, bringing many people together, because we're working on extremely complex problems that not only have a scientific element, technical elements, but all social, political, economic. You got to bring people together, and I think we help create that in our field, and I maybe to some extent at the university here, and I think with the Woods Institute is just the amplification of that. So I think if it had any impact on that to the extent that I have, I really feel proud of that, and like to be recognized for having done something on that. And the other part is the very strong feeling for protection of the environment, how important protection of the environment is to people in their lives, and that's something I was just felt what I should be devoted to, just wanted to devote to, and I hope whatever, maybe you've had some impact, however small, in making a better life for people.
I think it's going to be a big impact. And I know people will be very thankful for the kind of work that you've done here, and really continue to build not just your career, but build Stanford as a special institution. I want to refer to a book on a piece that you wrote for the 50th year anniversary of the department. You want to talk about what you've done here? Because we're going to make this available online. We'll put a URL in later on. But you want to say what this is?
Yes, if finishing up here, I've thought for a number of years. In fact, I started on this many, many years ago to indicate how it came about and indicating, how disappointed I was other places because they didn't have this broader expanse and the difficulty in many universities where departments don't get along and so forth. And coming to Stanford, I thought it was something I just wanted to write about that expansion of the program, how much support we got throughout the university, and the number of students. I just thought it was important to document that in some way before it's all lost.
It's a terrific piece, and for people who want to learn more about the development department, I would encourage you to look at this. So, Perry, I really do appreciate your time. This has been, for me, a wonderful experience to get to know you and to learn more about what you did to make Stanford a special place. So I really thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much.